Good day and welcome back to another DBZ Dokkan battle video. In this video we're going to be taking a look at how you can complete the Extreme Tech versus Super AGL Extreme Super Battle Road stage completely free to play. Now for most players this was originally a very challenging ESBR, probably one of the most challenging ESBR, at least that players kind of were embraced with when ESBR first came out, but now it has gotten, I would say, progressively easier. Obviously we're doing it completely free to play, so it must have, but we also have an arsenal of very good free to play extreme tech options. For example, we have the newly Easy Aid Gildo. We have alongside him obviously the newly Easy Aid Tech Ginyu. As a friend lead, we're going to be using the Frieza, the Easy Aid Tech Frieza, and we'll talk about him obviously as a unit and a bit more of them in detail. Then alongside that, we are going to be using the Frieza and Sorbet free-to-play unit, also a pretty solid one, I would say. And then alongside that, we are using the Tech Cooler, who's, I would say, a pretty good unit, if anything else. And then of course, we have the final little piece of the puzzle with Lord Slug. Now a lot of you might be wondering why I'm not using, for example, first form cell or anything like that. It's because of 50% tech lead. As much as it enables us to use first form EZA prime battle cell is good, it's also a bit limiting too much. We don't want to be at the point whereby we are now inherently gimped because of the way that we want to play the game. So it is something that is going to have to be addressed with the team, or in future. Hopefully they can get a better 77% lead. But for now, this is going to be the best team that you can make, at least from my perspective, in terms of build. Now, of course, as well, a big question that comes up is, do I use items? Yes, I do. And of course, if you know by now, we do not recognize World Tournament units as free-to-play units. So that's going to be something that's obviously going to have to be factored in when assessing the stage. Beyond that though, the team functions pretty well, I would say. I don't think we distinctly lack for anything too much. Obviously, we do lack a little bit of a first slot tank, which is why very often you'll find me use a Ghost Usher to get ourselves set up, or just to use items like Ghost, like Icarus or Whis, just to give ourselves some extra defense since we are lacking a first slot tank. The Golden Frieza Sorbet unit can technically be a tank, but it does lack a little bit of viability, just due to, I would say, some considerations around obviously his health requirement to tank. Generally speaking, they need a low center of health to tank, and being low on health is not really an ideal situation for the rest of the rotation. Oh, and last but not least, obviously to mention, we have Demon God Salsa. Also a pretty fun little unit that I think is quite nice for the team. So there's a couple reasons why we picked this lineup. We have obviously Gilda and Salsa, who provide stunning and sealing, which is obviously very helpful. Beyond that as well, we have the relatively capable abilities of Cooler and Frieza, who make a very nice combination together. Frieza providing us with some healing, Cooler providing him with support, which I think is very good. Captain Ginyu is there to assist Gildo, realistically activating both of their link sets and just being a solid pairing, which I think for the most part is good, at least from my perspective. Tends to get us some decent performance. And yeah, I would say beyond that, there's maybe not anything too crazy in terms of performance, at least like too necessary. Obviously, when you are looking at what you're pairing up and what you're kind of looking at doing, I think it's always worth it to consider like your rotations, and you don't have to keep rotations, but it is advisable. Lord Slug is assisting us with some decent linkage with First Form Frieza as well, as well as also featuring the ability to stun, which is actually going to be very helpful for us. That combined with Gildo, combined with Demon God Salsa, gives us a pretty decent fundamental level of control, which is always something you want to have in the SBR. You always want to have control levels. I would say having control of the battle is almost more important than having damage itself. Although of course you need damage to finish off enemies, otherwise you are going to run into a situation where you're just kind of stuck controlling them up but never able to finish them off. But yeah, I would say beyond that, most times it's a fairly solid situation whereby most players shouldn't have any massive issues with how they tackle this fight. Of course, I think if you want to maximize your abilities, I think in terms of extreme tech there's much better options overall, but one thing I would definitely bring is Golden Frieza or some kind of tanking unit that can just kind of soak up damage and enable the rest of the team to kind of just be their, you know, powerful like ceiling stunning mitigation type units that they are. I think that generally speaking is what I would say is the best kind of functionality or build design for this team. Of course, it's not mandatory and it doesn't mean that you have to do things that way, but that is my suggestion. You can also see we're rocking a support memory, of course, and that support memory is going to be the Frieza. 20% increased damage for the first 2 turns is pretty solid, and basically allows us to functionally have a little bit of a big damage boost and hopefully get rid of some of the units early on, which, like I say, is helpful. Being able to eliminate one unit is always something that's going to be distinctively helpful when you are assessing how difficult a stage is for people. So yeah, beyond that though, realistically I think there's nothing else too much poignantly to point out, at least in terms of the team and the team's build and functionality. I do think if there is anything of substance to point out, I would say that one thing to consider, at least from my perspective, is that you might want to obviously also look, when you bring in that first tank, you might want to also look at just kind of having a little bit more of a damage dealer, especially if you are bringing Golden Frieza. There can be limitations on your damage, and as much as it doesn't cause me grave issues, I would say that more damage is a lot better. I will say the teams, or at least this team, is obviously way better than in terms of free-to-play units than what we had at the time. And I would say that if I'm looking at most units now, this stage is looking way easier than it was at the time. I think extreme tech was very limited in options and now exists in a field where it's not nearly as limited as it was. So I don't just want to say that the free-to-play units got better. I do think the team overall and the roster just has gotten better over time. There's no specific friend LR that I would choose, but because we're running a Terrifying Conqueror's lead, Frieza does seem like the best option. Although if you can wangle it, you probably do want to use the Rose LR Zamasu. At least from a functionality point of view, they will just do better performance than Frieza. But again, it's just going to be up to you and what you want to run. Of course, as you can see, we're trying to hold the Dokkan attack as always. Holding the Dokkan attack traditionally obviously allows us to eliminate a phase way easier, and so that's also something that we're obviously factoring in to our performance, and just you want to try and hold. I'm very lucky in that I've been able to hold it twice now to get it at the beginning of stages. It's okay not to get it for the final fight, as long as you don't get it when you like have one more enemy and now you like waste your whole Dokkan attack on like one guy that has like 5% health. That's just traditionally isn't the best usage of a Dokkan attack. Of course, it doesn't necessarily mean that you have failed or anything. It just means that you're missing out on some damage, and when you have such a low damage team, It does generally cause you a little bit of issues, just due to the fact that you are maybe not running things as effectively as possible, especially when you only have free-to-play units, and so your damage is a little bit immediately subdued, which I think is always a shame, at least from my perspective. But yeah, I would say that kind of covers everything. Obviously, some of these units are relatively difficult to get, probably the Ginyu Force EZA being the most difficult, but I would say in general, everything is probably sitting in a decently acceptable / achievable place. It's just that maybe you might want to consider not using a Ginyu Force and maybe putting in a tank through Golden Frieza. That's probably the best way to talk about it. But yeah, that's gonna be it for me. Hope you enjoyed the video. See you next time. Bye.